not willing to look at fundamentals. When I was a boy, we were taught that irreversibly we were moving towards progress.
Yes.
That material wealth, material prosperity would solve our problems, would improve our way of life, and improve our civilization. We were taught that. And we achieved the creation of material prosperity in a way which we would never have dreamt of. We made the economy grow 400%, incredibly. And what have we done? We've destabilized our society. We've increased unemployment massively. We've totally destabilized our cities. We've uprooted our countryside. We've increased crime. Every single valid criterion for a stable society has become negative. Therefore, something must be wrong. And what has become wrong is that instead of the economy being there to serve us, we are there adoring, serving economic industries.
All right. What brought you to believe that you, as one very wealthy businessman, a businessman of the world with companies around the world, make you think that you can stop this treaty, this world treaty, when so many governments seem to be in favor of it?
Yeah, you just said the right word, governments. Who benefits from this?
Clinton administration's in favor of it.
Who benefits? I'll tell you who benefits.
Well, they'll say...
I'll tell you who benefits. Let me give you the facts. The facts are the people who benefit are the big major corporations. There's a divorce between the interests of major corporations and of society. When one used to say and believe, and probably rightly, what is good for General Motors is good for the United States. That is no longer true. Yeah. Today, the transnational corporations have annual sales of $4.8 trillion. They account for 1/3 of all, the top 100 alone account for 1/3 of all foreign direct investment. Now, how do they operate? They're no longer linked to the United States, the American ones, or to France, or to Britain. They operate by farming out their production to whatever country produces the cheapest labor, wherever they can get the biggest return on capital and pay the lowest part to labor.
Well, does that mean then that all the automobile companies in America are going to move their manufacturing facilities to Mexico?
They've certainly, most of them, increased their production in Mexico. But I'll tell you, in the last 2 or 3 months, IBM, Boeing, Advanced Microsystems have all announced movement offshore, all of certain parts of their manufacturing. And therefore, this is not just textile workers. It's not just furniture workers. It's not just people...
Where protectionism and tariffs have been most prevalent in the American economy.
Possibly. But what I'm saying is this attacks skilled labor as well as traditional labor.
Well, that's one of the arguments made. I want to move to tactics, but one of the arguments made is that you are talking about essentially unskilled labor.
I'm not.
And that the labor force of the future has to do with technology, and it has to do with the service industry, and that these 4 billion people you're talking about are not prepared to do those jobs which will fuel a modern economy around the world.
The facts are just demonstrate the opposite.
All right, well, let me interrupt you. Let me interrupt you.
I've got to answer you.
All right, because I want to get to tactics.
It is just the facts of the opposite. Firstly, it started with the textiles and the shoes and all the rest of it. Right. And those industries were decimated. And we lost millions of employments and people employed. Secondly, it was followed by the high-tech industries. And as I say, in the last few months, you've had those. Thirdly, the service industries. Yeah. The service industries, these are facts. The service industries are also moving offshore. There are satellites up there. If you take Swiss Air has moved part of its back office into Bombay. Why? Because they can communicate through the satellite and reduce their costs by 95%.
All right, joining me, I want you to do this. Because you have made this argument before, and you testified before Senator Pollin's committee, the Commerce Committee of the Senate. Joining me now is the chairman of the President's Council on Economic Advisors. Laura Tyson, you have heard this argument made by Sir James Goldsmith. He is a man who's been frequently right in his understanding of the economy and how business works, and he has a frontline, hands-on experience. Where is he wrong in your judgment and the judgment of the Clinton administration?
Well, I think that the evidence speaks for itself. We have an economy right now which is rapidly growing, which has generated 5 million jobs. There are many high-wage, high-quality jobs that have been generated. This is an economy which is depending in part on exports. We know that $1 billion of exports translates into about 17,000 American jobs. We know that those jobs pay higher than average wages in America. We also know, incidentally, from a whole series of studies, that foreign direct investment by American firms actually helps create jobs in America, because when American firms actually make investments abroad and reduce their costs, they're more competitive globally. What does that mean? It actually means they can employ more people in the United States. American companies in general do not move production abroad in order to find total alternatives for production here. They tend to complement their production base here with production bases other places, which allows us to remain competitive here. So I think the facts speak for themselves. Trade is a benefit to the U.S. economy. And incidentally, one of the things that we don't talk enough about is the benefit which comes from having greater choice and lower prices for American consumers. Trade is a two-way street. We get better export opportunities and better jobs as a consequence of being able to sell abroad, and we get more choice and lower prices at home as a consequence of having more foreign competition in the United States market. It's win-win on both sides.
Jimmy Goldsmith.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Firstly, exports. The facts are in there again. You've got the second worst year in American history in balance of trade. $150 billion you're aiming at an export at trade deficit. So you're importing infinitely more than you're exporting. And if that is, I can't remember how many jobs you said it was per $1 billion, that's a hell of a lot of lost jobs. Secondly, the new jobs being created are largely part-time and very much in lower salaries before you even had the competition of NAFTA. And before you, of course, long before the Uruguay round, which I hope will never come about, you've already had a very substantial increase in hourly and weekly earnings. And as for lower prices for imported goods, how does it work? What happens is people transfer their production offshore, they import their products and sell them just below the level of the locally produced product. And that way, they manage to really put the local company out of business. That's what's been happening throughout Europe.
Well, the problem with that argument is that there are just a number of problems with that argument. The facts are just not right. First of all, just on the basis of the question of what jobs are being created in the United States right now, it is the case, if you just look in the 10 months of this year, exactly the 10 months when you're saying our trade imbalance did worsen, and it did worsen. In those 10 months, this economy created more high-quality jobs, that is above average earnings jobs, than in the previous 5 years combined. There is no simple relationship between a trade imbalance and the quality or number of American jobs. American jobs have increased by more than 5 million since January of 1993, and the quality of those jobs has improved. That's the first point. The second point is that while we have had some foreign investment going abroad, a lot of that foreign investment has gone abroad precisely because of trade barriers abroad, which have made it impossible for American producers to produce here and sell in growing foreign markets. What's so wonderful about the Uruguay round and what was so wonderful about NAFTA is that barriers to U.S. products being produced here and sold abroad are being brought down. So now American producers don't face that choice.
You are arguing that if, in fact, they break down the barriers to U.S. products, then American companies no longer have an incentive to go and produce those products within that country in order to sell to that market?
Exactly, because if you look at the motivations for foreign investment, why do American firms choose to produce abroad? The answer most frequently cited is they choose to produce abroad not to lower their costs by going to cheaper wage locations, which is what is being suggested here. No, they mostly go abroad in order to sell into foreign markets. And when you say, well, why are you producing abroad? Why not produce in the United States and export to the foreign market? They will say the foreign market is shut off. The tariffs are too high. The regulations are too high. We get no intellectual property protection abroad.
Okay.
The Uruguay round will open up those markets, and American producers can stay here, hire American workers, and sell all around the world.
Right, well, this is just totally contradictory to the facts. I mean, let me give you just two recent quotes in the last few days. A man called Audrey Freeman, who's economist on the board of Manpower. What did he say this week? They're the largest supplier of temporary workers in the States, as you know. I'm quoting. He said, wage costs actually declined last year. What did David Resler of Nomura Securities say? Only 1/3 of new jobs have gone to adult men. But what is more important?
Well,
is the fact... Sorry.
But those facts, such as they are, and they are partial facts, bear no relationship to the trade issue. I want to say, first of all, the reason wage costs have not gone up is because productivity has gone up sufficiently to allow wages to increase without